We are members of a group called Waterways of the Illawarra. We live in the Illawarra region just south of Sydney. For the last couple of years, we've been walking our local waterways. We start at the sea and head inland as far as we can go. We position it as a socially engaged art project, but it's also simply a way of creating a deeper connection to the local area where we live. We live in the Illawarra region, in the city of Wollongong, long characterised by heavy industries like coal and steel. Wollongong is in a period of transition as these industries wane, largely due to the effects of globalised trade. The Illawarra region is marked by a unique geography, hemmed in by the sea to the east and a steep escarpment to the west. Rainwater seeps down the escarpment, forming countless waterways. Rivulets, creeks, gullies, brooks. Some are named, many are not.
Walking Bellambi Creek, Vince spots what he thinks might be Aboriginal tool sharpening grooves in the sandstone rock of the creek bed. The fact that the grooves are now submerged suggests that the land and sea were in very different relationship when tools were sharpened on this rock. Walking upstream along creeks gives us the opportunity to bring attention to these spaces. As we walk up Bellambi Creek, we're faced with several impediments: high fences, impassable outcrops of lantana weed, railway lines, highways, culverts, and walled-off private property.
The creeks and waterways of the Illawarra are obvious indicators of climate change on a number of levels. As we walk up the creeks, the interaction between the natural course of waterways and human development becomes clear. Water irresistibly flows where it can. Creeks and rivers have a tendency to meander if left to themselves, but in an environment where human development takes precedence, waterways are often forced to flow in straight lines along concrete channels or through culverts under roads. Sections of some creeks are maintained and tended by bush care groups. Other sections are obscured and redirected for the convenience of human habitation. Hard surfaces like roads and driveways, concrete and paving, increase concentrations of local pollutants from runoff. Water is funnelled ever more quickly over these hard surfaces down towards the sea by whichever course it can take. In times of flood, the stormwater infrastructure often fails. We're already seeing the impacts of climate change, with an increasingly hotter, drier climate being interspersed with more severe rain events. If this trend continues, drought conditions and higher temperatures will be the norm, and floods will have a major impact. The creeks in this region flow through large tracts of human development, much of it housing. In 1998, record rainfalls caused a major flooding event along the Illawarra escarpment. The 98 flood showed how the volume of water flowing down the creeks can quickly change from a benign trickle into a raging torrent or waterfall, particularly in areas where the steep incline of the escarpment closely flanks human development. This particular flood starkly exposed the effects of development policies which have allowed houses and businesses to be built close to the creeks. Backyards were swept away, and roads and buildings crumbled and were dispersed by the torrent. Many people were stranded on the roofs of houses, and others died in the melee. Suddenly, creeks which were rarely thought about or talked about were everyone's business. Today, as we follow creeks upstream from the sea, through playing fields, housing, railway lines, roads, farms, industry, schools, commercial districts, and up into the temperate rainforest underneath the escarpment, I can still see evidence of those floods nearly 20 years ago. Landforms have changed irrevocably, and a whole range of mitigation measures have been put in place. It's curious to watch this sculptural dance between the creeks and humans, where water shapes landforms and humans reshape watercourses. Climate change will contribute to a rise in sea levels. This will affect many coastal regions in Australia, including the Illawarra, where there are many tracts of low-lying housing. Local councils are faced with the task of taking preventative action, such as the building of seawalls. Sea levels rise and fall over millennia. Think of the Great Barrier Reef, which was exposed land only 10,000 years ago.
On one of our many detours, we stand in the street consulting our map to find a way to pick up the creek line again. A passerby asks us if we're looking for directions to the Bellambi railway station. No, I reply, we're looking for the creek.
What does it mean to walk up a bunch of local creeks? Without any sense of expertise, without any specialised scientific knowledge, without any dedicated understanding of Indigenous culture and colonial history. We walk as curious amateurs, occasionally inviting experts along, but also very much concerned with discovering things in a naive and experiential way, which also often involves the projection of possible, semi-credible histories and explanations. We position what we do as a form of art practice. Our method frames processes taking place beyond the art gallery as works of live art. We connect to the contemporary discipline of socially engaged art, which draws upon a range of art and non-art traditions to provide a context for social exploration and intervention. Conversations, interactions, urban explorations and walking are all part of the art-making toolbox used in this field. Sometimes the environmental focus of our work connects to traditions of 1960s land art. Normally land art is characterised in terms of large-scale earth-moving equipment, monumental mounds of dirt, trenches, etc., but also had a more subtle, meditative aspect. In 1973, the artist Robert Smithson described a walk he took through Central Park in New York. He follows a creek line, much as we do. He notices the roads and bridges and trash, much as we do. Smithson positions Frederick Law Olmsted, the architect of Central Park, as a picturesque land artist, shaping a profoundly heterogeneous and dialectical space. The picturesque is often seen as a sentimental evasion of the more serious aesthetic registers of the sublime and the beautiful. But Smithson reinterprets the picturesque as something that profoundly engages with the temporality and politics of landscape. The landscape is affected by people, it includes them and registers their influence. We're less focused on construction, on making things. Our footprint is lighter, directed more towards discovery and conversation, but we also work in this broadly picturesque mode. Environmental change is manifest less in terms of global indices and demonstrable scientific evidence than it is through small experiential details. noticing the curiously correct straightness of a concrete sluiceway, pausing before a tangle of flowering weeds, hearing black cockatoos squawk above a shopping trolley-filled drain, following a long detour through the suburbs in order to find our way back to the creek line. Dimensions of change, continuity and complexity are immediately evident in the strange, inextricable relation between diverse natural and human elements.
On this walk up Bellambi Creek, we've somehow missed the colliery we had been aiming for. Instead, we end up at a small green park beside the creek. Scrambling down the steep bank, we find an abandoned veggie patch. The soil here is very rich, and there are the remnants of a good crop of tomatoes and corn, as well as a makeshift scarecrow. We root around and discover some unharvested purple potatoes, tonight's dinner.